Greetings. Welcome back to HMLive. Trust you're having a blessed week. Here we are in the midst of summer, busy camp season. And of course, you've probably already gone through the initial spurt, at least, of people going on vacations. And my experience as a pastor was we had those that were gone, and then everybody got back for a few weeks, and then just before summer came to an end, it seemed to happen again. Trust you've had a good week, though, and your home Bible studies this week have gone well. You've met some new people that you're capable of reaching with the gospel of Jesus Christ. For some time, I've been discussing with you surviving the maze of church planting. And if you haven't seen the previous 4 HMLives that focus on that, then I encourage you to go back. In reality, the issues that are addressed are probably relevant to all of us, not just to church planners. And I've talked about 6 different topics, if I remember right, that can hang your ministry up, things that can tie you up. So we're using the analogy of finding yourself trapped. You're at a dead end. You're trying to work your way out of a maze, surviving the maze of church planting. We're trying to help you see some things that are just flat out dead ends. There is absolutely no future in them. And we don't want you as a church planter, we don't want you as a pastor to get hung up on some things that you shouldn't. I'm going to talk today for just a very few minutes about trying to be someone that you are not. I get to be in lots of different home missions churches, and one of the things that I've just come to realize is the overwhelming reality of how different every one of those church plants is. I've been in home missions churches that were meeting in schoolrooms, some that were meeting in other denominations, various rooms, and some that have bought buildings and built buildings and various things. So from even the structure, from the building, and then when you walk in, every single one has a different way of approach. I think the only thing that I see consistent with every home missions church I go in is that every one I've visited has a partners in missions supporting foreign missions of the United Pentecostal Church. And that's a wonderful, that's an exciting thing. Now, here's what I see that home missionaries can get into. It's trying to attain success by being something that they are not. One of the realities of the Scripture is that Christian workers, the people God calls, are very diverse. In this 5-fold ministry, apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, diversity of gifts, different ways of moving and operating. The book of Romans talks about the motivational gifts. Some of you have been reading about that in the director's communique. Again, there's a gift of leadership. There's a gift of compassion. All of these things dramatically affect the way one goes about dealing with people. One can have a different personality, a different temperament. I tend to be a little choleric / melancholy. Others are very sanguine. They're outgoing. They're the life of the party, and that's a great. Each of us are different, is the point of that particular thing. The path we follow in life, we have different work experiences, we have different educational backgrounds, and all of those things come into play at being what we bring different gifts. Some people have tremendous music ability. Now, one of the things that affects church planners is trying to do the work of God, trying to build a church using the model and the pattern of somebody who's right down the road. It may even be that the church they're trying to model after is not a home missions church. It's never been, or has not been for many years, not been for decades, a church that just had a small group of people gathering in a service. You can't afford to do that. Okay, think about this. If you don't have giftings in music, why would you make it a major outreach to have an Easter cantata? Now that may sound foolish, and it probably is, but you can't play to a strength. As a matter of fact, if you attempt to emphasize something that is not really your strength, you instead, you actually emphasize it as being part of your weakness. Don't try to be something you're not. When it comes to public speaking, of course, We use Bible terminology there, preaching and teaching, and there is obviously a difference between preaching and teaching and simply someone who is in a public speaking forum. But again, if I could borrow that term for just a minute, each of us in our communication to a group of people follow different paths. You probably will not be able to preach to your handful of people like Paul Mooney or Jerry Jones or Kenneth Haney would if there were an audience of 120, 150, or 1,000 or 3,000 in the room. It is a different matter of communication. You've got to connect with the audience at a different level. You may not have the ability to convey humor, and for goodness sake, I think that when you're in home missions, you don't have to move into preacher voice. You know exactly the voice I'm talking about, that way of expressing ourselves that gets loud, and if you're in a handful of people, it may even seem particularly obnoxious. Again, different gifts of evangelism. I believe strongly in home Bible studies. People are won through the sowing of the seed. They're also won through the sowing of the seed of ourselves as saints of God in the lives of others. Building networks. Chester Mitchell built a wonderful church just out of Washington, D.C., establishing a network of people before they ever had their first public service. Others have used long-term strategies like children's evangelism. And that 9-year-old child who you're evangelizing today, only 10 years from now, is going to be 19. You say, well, you can't do much with 9-year-old children. Well, you can. You can reach their parents, and then you can understand you're building for the future. And if you reach enough of those 9-year-olds on the way to becoming 19, you can have a strong church of young adults in just a matter of a very few years. It may be the emphasis as family ministry or getting involved with your community as volunteer in various things. The point that I'm trying to make here is that you don't have to do it just like somebody else. You don't have to pattern your ministry after somebody else. And let me just throw one other in here. Paul was, in my estimation, a career church planner. His work of evangelism, he'd go and stay somewhere. He would gather together a group of people, but then he turned those people over to Titus, or he turned them over to Timothy, or to one of his other faithful workers. There are some of you who are trying to be 20-year church planners who God has called you to be a career church planner. You're to go somewhere, and in a matter of months, you gather a group of people together, and you 3 years in, you have a little building built, and you've got it up to 60 folks, and then it's time for you to turn that over to somebody else. Scott Sistrunk in Detroit is doing exactly that. We need more people to find that as their gifting and say, I'm being effective for God because I'm planting churches, turning them over to somebody else who can more effectively pastor them than what I could. You can't do everything. You can't be like everybody. You can't have all of the strengths that everybody else has. The point, at some point, you have to do something. Your something does not have to be like mine. It doesn't have to be like another home missionary in your district. We get so enamored with success. We look at a person and we latch on to that individual's idiosyncrasy rather than determining what is the principle that has worked for them. Be careful that we not look at someone's extreme and don't comprehend that there are some very basic things that are fundamental to building a church. Play to your strengths. If you're good with children's ministry, with puppets and all of that stuff, why would you not use that strategy? Use that in your community. Let it be known that your church is the church that loves kids, and then be building those children. You're going to see them saved. You're going to see them born again. You're going to begin discipling them at a young age. You're going to have them tithing from their lawn mowing money when they're 12 and 13 years old.